There's fish on the drum. Snap weight. First fish of the day. Nice size kokanee. There we go. This feels good to get that first fish in the bag in the morning. So I always bleed my kokanee. The only time I don't do that is if like they're exceptionally small fish, like I'm just catching little 12-inch dinks or something. So what I'll do is I'll thump them on the head. I just use hair pliers, which I'm not going to do on camera, just to keep YouTube happy. And then I'll cut the gills and let them bleed out. What I wanted to do today is to treat these kokanee differently after the catch and show you what the end results are, comparing, say, harvesting a fish and not putting it on ice. And you think that's crazy, but I'm out here all the time and I see people just dragging around fish on stringers over the side of their boat, even in the summertime. Surface water temps here are 73. So I'm going to do one fish where I don't bleed it, I don't put it on ice. I only want to do one that way because I don't want to waste this resources. I'm going to do one where I bleed it and put it on ice. I'm going to do one where I don't bleed it and put it on ice. I know a lot of people who don't bleed their fish. I'm a big believer in bleeding. And then I'm going to do one where I bleed it, put it on ice, gut it, and then I'm going to wait at least 24, 36 hours to fillet it. That's what I really like to do. That's my favorite approach, and I'll talk more about that as we go here. So it doesn't take long to bleed out a kokanee. It just takes, a minute or two. They don't have a ton of blood, and I don't like to just keep these fish up here in 70-degree water. So once most of the blood's been drained out, you can take and put them on ice. That's a beautiful fish, though. Great way to start the day. Whoa, that's a release. That's a big fish. The way that thing's. Alright, so that one I'm not going to bleed, but I will mark it with a little clip on the tail so I know which one it is. I'll just slice this tail right down the middle there. Here we go. So that one's not going to get bled. It's going to go right on the ice, and we'll see how that meat looks. There we go. There's fish. Wow, it's a monster. There we go. Into the net. Sadly, this is going to be the sacrificial fish where I'm not going to ice it, not going to bleed it, just going to throw it in a plastic bag in the back of the kayak. But I want to show people how this really degrades the quality of the meat. I won't waste this fish, I'll still use it. Alright, so that one's just going to go in a bag. Just going to lay it in the back. Water temp's actually 74, whereas the air temp's in low 60s. So it's probably better to have it in a bag just laying in the back of the kayak than it is to be actually dragging it around on a chain or a stringer like I see a lot of folks do. Now you can put fish on like crushed ice, or you can put them on ice packs. Personally, I found I get more deformation in the meat if I put them on like ice packs, because there's more weight to those ice packs. If you lay the ice packs on top of them, of course you can crush the meat, and I think that actually can lead to a little bit of tissue damage. Whereas if you just lay them on a nice bit of crushed ice and throw a few cubes on top of them, that cold really radiates up. I don't like putting them in an ice slush or something like that, because I find it does tend to soften them up over time. And if it's just for an hour or two, it doesn't seem to matter. But if you're going to be out there all day, if you let them just float around in ice slush, they do tend to soften up a bit. They absorb that water, get a little mushier. So that's why I tend to like to put them on top of the ice and make sure that my cooler drains, or that they're staying well above the slush down below. There's fish. See if I can get this one in. And that's my number 10 for the day, folks. Alright, gonna get fish number 10 here on the ice. and we'll get back to the dock and take you back home to the cleaning station. And then we'll get back home and we'll look at these fish on the fillet table and look at how the different treatment of kokanee post-catch really impacts the meat quality. Okay, I'm back at my fillet station here. You have to pardon the chickens. They just know they're about ready to get treats. They love to eat this kokanee leftovers. All right, so here's my fish that I didn't bleed. I didn't put on ice. It's warm to the touch. See, it's kind of bleached out a little bit. This is the fish I put on ice but kept bled. You can see I marked it with a cut in the fin. And then this is a fish that I bled and put on ice. And then I've got a whole cooler of fish that I'm going to gut and leave on ice or in the refrigerator for 24 hours and come back to them. I'm going to talk about that once I get to this fish. So let's just start by looking at the fish here that I kept at lake temperature. I saw it today. There was an angler out there catching trout and kokanee and just putting them on a stringer over the side in 74-degree water. That's lethal. You're just going to be dragging them around in room temperature water all morning. So this is not something that uncommon. People do this all the time. All right, so let's look at this fish, just see what it looks like when I fillet it. It already feels softer to the touch. So we'll just go down and take a look at it. And you see there's lots of blood spots all down through the meat here. You can see that. You see these blood spots here. There's a lot of blood just permeated throughout the meat here. It hasn't drained out in any way. It's very soft to the touch. Is it edible? Sure. Is it choice? Probably not. Okay, you can see there's a lot of blood being left on the table from this fish because there's still a lot of blood in it. So I'm going to go ahead and set that one aside. Okay, now let's look at this one here that I did not bleed, but I did put on ice. It's very much in rigor, so it's very difficult to clean or fillet properly. So a lot of times people will bend them to break them out of rigor. But when you do this, you can actually cause little tears in the tissue, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to fillet and get a clean cut and not get any sort of breakage or tearage in the tissue. So we're going to go ahead and see what this one is. You see I marked this one with a cut in its tail. There you see tons of blood coming out already. You can see there's a fair amount of blood here up around the gills, but it's not too bad. Good color on this fish. Minimal amount of blood here. I find that when I chill them or cool them, you can see when I push down though, see all the blood coming out along the spine here? That's all blood that was trapped in here that didn't drain out because I didn't bleed this fish. Still in pretty good condition. Sometimes you'll get tearing here. In this case, I didn't, so I was fortunate. So now here's a fish that I bled and put on ice, which is my second best choice, I guess. The meat is very firm. See how it cuts easier when the meat is firm? And it's very clean, good looking meat. So if I touch this, it's firm. This is also one that was chilled. It's very firm. This is one that was not chilled or bled. You can see the difference here. This thing's all bloody. It's very mushy to the touch. And I'm actually starting to get some of that separation of the meat there. So it starts to break down. Its cohesion breaks down a little bit. You don't get that nice clean look to it where it's a continuous surface. You'll start to get breakage here as this meat softens up from being warm. I'm actually getting a little bit here too on the one that I broke out of rigor. You can see there's some tearing right here along just above the ribs, just a little bit of tearing, and that comes from that tension on the muscle tissue, and then as the knife cuts through, it just peels it apart a little bit. Whereas here with this cold one that I kept bled, I'm not getting it as much. But what I like to do is actually leave them on ice for 24 hours, so I will gut them. So I'm going to go ahead and gut the other fish and leave them on ice or in the refrigerator overnight. So just to recap, here's a fish that was kept warm and not bled. You can see it's a little bit mushy, there's a little bit of tearing, but there's a ton of blood all throughout the fillet. This one was not bled, but kept very cold. It's actually pretty clean. There's not that much blood in here. I mean, you can see a little bit starting to seep up to the surface in places. But keeping it cold also stops that blood from flowing around and moving around in the body. And it seems to give a better product in the end. And then this is my second best choice, which is bled and kept on ice and filleted the first day. Pretty minimal tearing, even though it was in rigor. But the other ones I'm going to let drop out of rigor in the fridge or on ice overnight, and then we're going to see how they do. Now here's a quick tip for when you're gutting kokanee. There's a specific way I like to do it. So you just start in the cloaca here, and you can just cut up right between the two pectoral fins. You don't want to go super deep inside here. You can use scissors for this too, it's fine. And then once you get to that point here, you can pull everything out. You can tell these kokanee have been feeding on zooplankton because they've got lots of green in there, so they've been filtering out the phytoplankton as well. It's the male. So you can discard the guts, the digestive tract, and get the liver and the heart. And some people even pull out the gills. I don't always do that. I probably should, because they say the gills can release a chemical into the body around the meat up around the head. But the main thing I want you to see is down in here. This is the bloodline, and you really do want to get that out now. A lot of times you can just use a spoon. I actually have a plastic tool here that I can just go through and I scrape, and that will pull all that bloodline out. It's just kind of a gooey black gelatinous mass. So make sure you get that bloodline out of there. It doesn't take much, just the end of a butter knife or a spoon, and you don't have to rake really hard. And then you can clean all of that bloodline out of there. You can give it a quick rinse too with some cold water to help get the blood out of there that is remaining. And then I'm going to return this to the refrigerator overnight. As you can see, that bloodline's all gone now. It's nice and clean. So when I fillet these, it'll come out really nice because I won't have any bloodline attached along the top of the ribs there when I fillet. Okay, so they've sat in the fridge overnight now, the gutted ones, and you can see they've come out of rigor completely on their own, so there's no stiffness to them. It's going to make them a lot easier to fillet. And I've just found that you get a lot cleaner cut too. The meat is just a better consistency for filleting. So we'll go ahead and you see how easy it slides along the spine. It just seems to be easier to move along there, and you get a really nice, good, smooth, clean cut. The meat stays intact. There's no tearing on the meat there. So that's why I really prefer to ice, then gut, and then either refrigerate or keep on ice for another 24 hours before I even bother with filleting. You just get a much cleaner fillet in that process. All right, guys, I'm gonna finish processing my fish, and if you have any questions, just let me know in the comment section below and I'll get back to you. And just remember, fish smarter, not harder. Bye, guys.